The Marty and Laura Show is brought to you by Veterinary Village. With locations throughout Wisconsin, Veterinary Village is dedicated to enhancing the quality of animal and human lives today and into the future. All right, welcome everybody. This is the Marty and Laura Show. I'm Laura.
And I'm Marty.
And we have some really cool stuff for you today. We're going to talk about finding a new pet. Like, how do we do that? Like, we talk all the time. We hear questions all the time. How do I find a good pet? How do I find a responsible breeder? How do I find a responsible rescue? How do I go about this? I want to do it right. I want to source my pet right. How do I do that? So, what do we got, Marty?
Well, we have so many more options than we used to.
Mhm.
It used to be that everything in the shelter was just, there. They were usually stray dogs that came to the shelter, or you went to a breeder. And the breeders, I have a great relationship with my breeders, love my breeders, and love what I can do with the predictability of getting dogs from breeders. But even without that predictability, now with DNA testing, there's a lot of information you can get about a dog before you get it. So let's back up for 1 second and figure out, do we want a dog? Do we want a cat? Is a rat a better choice? What
Ish.
species do we want to live with?
Yes. I think Marty, you make a really good point because looking at our lifestyles and starting there is super important, right? If I
Mhm.
work 18 hours a day, probably a dog is not my best choice.
Right. And I hear that from a lot of people that they're just like, it's not fair to the dog. And I can't disagree with that. We have some crazy hours, but we also get home during the day, can let dogs in and out, can flex our schedule based on what we need. So it
Work.
really does depend a
do-
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, depends on lifestyle. But I would start off by looking at what species is really best for you. Maybe it's a bird, maybe it's a rat. I mean, rats make great pets if you're into rats. I personally don't care for them. That's not my choice, but they're smart, they're clean. Kids do really well with them. So if you have a child that's really hankering for a pet and you don't really feel like a dog is in your future in the near future, it's important that you look at all what your choices are. There's a whole program that called Pets in the Classroom that can be really helpful. There's all kinds of really great books. I know Patricia McConnell talked a lot about rats as pets. So we have lots of other choices. It doesn't have to be a dog or a cat. It can be other things. Now, I try to avoid the exotic pets
Hmm.
for people who don't have any experience with them because those that gets to be really dicey. But there's a lot of other pets that you can choose. And then of course cats are great pets for a lot of people because
Right.
if you aren't home very much, the litter box takes care of their needs. Put out food, put out water, put out an automatic feeder, an automatic water. You can get them with tags on them so that if you have more than one cat in the household, the cat can be identified by the feeder for how much food they should have access to or what type of food they should have. Yeah, you don't know this? Oh, yeah.
Okay, we've
Yeah.
already blown up Laura's brain and we're like 3 minutes into this
Okay.
podcast. Laura's
Sorry, I
not the
thought you knew
cat
this.
person, so I'm just saying.
So you can put different tags on your cats that allow them access. So if you have one cat on a prescription diet for kidneys and another cat on a prescription diet for obesity, they have little tags and the feeder will open and close based on who the cat is. And very easily you can sort out who gets access to what. The cat litter boxes now, they have detection in them so that if the cat has blood in the urine or the pH isn't right or there's glucose, any of those things that the litter will tell you. So even if you're because of your demands of your job, your life, whatever, you have limits on how much time you can spend at home. Maybe you're home for 4 days straight and then you're gone for a few in a row. The cats can do really well. Dogs, of course, that's not a lifestyle that they can sustain unless you have a great neighbor, a great dog walker, and a good resource for that kind of stuff. But cats do really well, and a lot of people don't give cats the credit that they should for the kind of social behaviors that they have. A lot of people think cats are pretty aloof, but cats, especially if you raise them in pairs, are much more social with people, with each other. And I just don't think you should ever raise a single cat. I think cats should always be purchased, adopted, and raised as a cohort, not as an individual patient, pet. I just think they do much better.
You know what I want to do too, Marty? Before we get any further down this, I want to talk about why we should have pets. Because there's a lot of
Oh,
Human Animal Bond Research Institute and other places that talks about the benefits of
yes,
they lower blood pressure, they increase not dopamine, what's the one? Serotonin. They do
right.
a lot of really great stuff. So talk to
They
us about
do.
that.
Sure, they get you out of the house, they get you out of bed. So even if you have a cat, you have to get up in the morning. If you have a dog, you have to get up, get them outside. It's good for you if you're out exercising with them. I have clients that do a wonderful job of walking their pets. So it's really important socially. The dogs are the best social lubricant ever. You can't go anywhere with a dog and not have somebody talk to you.
Chick
You know, I
magnet. Everybody just hear the word
oh yeah.
chick magnet.
Oh yeah, when we were in vet school, the guys in vet school, because we were off campus with the veterinary school, and there were 3 men for every woman in our class, they would take their surgery lab dogs to the main campus and just hang out on central campus because the girls would come over and they would at least have some interaction with females that weren't veterinary students in that format. So yes, they are wonderful social lubricants. I've raised 6 service dogs for Canine Companions for Independence, and so I've been able to take my dogs into places that normal people don't, like to law school, like to the basketball games, to the dentist, to Target. And they're wonderful social lubricants because everybody comes up and talks to you. If you have a dog, you would be completely ignored. You'd be invisible to other people until you have that adorable puppy on a leash. And then you become the center of everyone's attention. I could never go to Target and just run in and get one thing and run back. I'd have to leave the dog in the car because there was no running in and out. It was a minimum of an hour when you'd walk into a Target or Walmart with a puppy on a leash.
Mhm. And, just to take kind of a global view, the world is a little wonky doodle, yeah? I mean,
Oh
COVID
yeah.
up a lot of our really normal that we had for generations interactions. And I
Yeah.
think as a society, we are globally trying to figure out how to reimagine those. And I'm
Hmm.
talking about pets as social lubricant, talking about pets as companions.
Hmm.
And if you spend your entire day staring at a screen, having a warm, breathing being with you or near you
Hmm.
or available to you literally changes your brain chemistry per the
Oh
research.
yeah. Oh yeah. People that work from home and they live by themselves, that may be the only interaction they have that doesn't involve a screen.
Mhm.
So I have people that'll come in and say, well, after this dog is gone, my husband, my wife, my partner, my spouse, my whatever said, we're not getting another dog. And I look at them and I say, okay, when you walk in the front door of your house, does your partner, spouse, best friend, whoever, when you walk in the front door and they're sitting in the chair, maybe they're reading the newspaper, people don't do that much anymore. They're watching TV, they're on the computer. Do they throw down the newspaper, jump out of the chair, run across the room, throw their arms around you and say, honey, I'm so glad you're home. Can I get you a drink? Do they ever do that? The answer is, no. I said, okay, the day that your partner does that for you, you don't need a new dog. If they are not doing that, that's the line you go home and say is, and actually, I bought an oven mitt at the store the other day that said, home is where someone runs to greet you. I bought as many as I could because they were pretty much sold out. They're going to be Christmas gifts for some of my staff because it's really true. Home is where someone runs to greet you. And walking in the door of your house, and this is why I have clients that have multiple dogs, is they can't bear the thought of coming home to a no dog house. And if they only have one and they lose that dog, their house is
I can't even.
silent. It's painful to even walk in the door. So having that additional pet, cat, dog, whatever it happens to be in the house can be a really helpful transition to make if you lose a pet, because home is where someone runs to greet you, and it's really rewarding. It's isn't that nice? Your kids, your spouse, your whatever, they like, you're home, where's dinner? But no, not the dog.
And I think about this. It really hits home for me a lot. I had what I had sort of expected was going to be my last wire hair pointer, my Bing dog, who I love. dearly. And he was born in my hands. And in February, he died in my arms. And that broke a part of me I didn't think I had left to break.
Yeah.
When you a lot of dogs and kind
Yeah.
of they come and they go, and you live through life and you show them and they go home
Yeah.
and um, the salvation for that was Agatha, the Spinoni, who okay, she's a Spinoni. She's incredibly sweet, and she's not Bang, but she was there, and she, you know, cozied up and snuggled up and carried bears around and threw them at me, and I was able to get through what was truly and honestly, I didn't think I had a heart left to break after this many years of
Yeah.
dog. So
Yeah, and they're all different, even as many dogs as you and I have had and do have. There's always something special about each of them that brings a little spark to your life. So they're not interchangeable, they're not fungible, they're not all the same.
they're
They're
not
all
coasters.
unique and special in their own way.
They're
Yep.
not coasters. So that's a good segue to talking about you've now evaluated your life, and
Mhm.
you've decided that a pet is the right answer, and that a dog is going to be what you're going to have because
Yep.
you have the lifestyle for it, you can arrange the lifestyle for it. So when we talk about they're not toasters, this is an important part of the conversation when we talk about acquiring a new pet, and
Right.
particularly if that pet's a dog.
Right. So you would kind of ask me to tell a little story about pet selection. And I was thinking about it this morning. I have a client, she's been a client since at least 1987, if not before. So almost 40 years she's been a client of ours. And the first time I ever met her, she came into the practice with a sick cat over a weekend. And she brought this 16-year-old cat in that was jaundiced and losing weight and vomiting and really sick. And I looked him over and I told her what diagnostics we could do. And I said, well, we have three choices here. One is we can do some diagnostics and medically manage him here. Two is I can send you to the referral center at the university, because at that point there were very few options for that. And three is we can euthanize him. And she glared at me and stood right in my face and said, I have his mother. Okay, so euthanizing the 16-year-old jaundiced, sick, vomiting male cat is not an option. She's like, right. So over the course of the years, she has brought many, many of her dogs to us. Every one of her dogs was always big, overweight, typically overweight. And she lost her husband along the way. Her kids grew up and moved out. And she decided that it was time for her to get a new dog because she was now dogless. So I'd been down to the vet school for a surgical lab where we were practicing different techniques and researching the anesthesia and all kinds of stuff, and did a neuter on this adorable little hound puppy, just this cute little hound puppy that I neutered. And I thought, gosh, he would just be such a nice little dog for her to have. He's going to be like 40 pounds. He's going to be a nice size, had a very sweet temperament. So I got home, called her and said, Jean, I think I found the next dog for you. And she's like, oh, great. Well, tell me about it. So I told her, she called the vet school. She went down, she picked him up. Well, this dog that I thought was going to be 40 pounds turned to be 140 pounds.
What?
So he was nowhere near the size dog that was really appropriate for an elderly widow to live with on her own out in the country. I mean, from a size perspective, he was formidable, so no one was going to mess with her. But from a perspective of her being able to pick him up and put him in the car, it wasn't a good option. So the predictability of going to a breeder or having a dog that's DNA tested, or a lot of the other criteria that we can have, can be really helpful in the predictability, especially when you get into a lifestyle, an age group, a category where you live in an apartment and you can only have a dog that's 20 pounds. You can't have a dog that sheds. You can only have, certain things. I think it's important that people can rely on breeders and DNA testing and some of those things. I mean, some of the DNA tests can even tell us how big the dog is likely to be. So it's fascinating to me that we have the technology to do this. And some of the rescues and some of the organizations can do those DNA tests before you make a decision to take a dog in, whether it's a rescue or a breeder or a surrender or whatever it happens to be.
Mhm.
So I think the predictability of those things are important, especially as you are selecting the dog when you're 70 years old, and know that when you're 85, you can't pick that dog up and put him in the car when he blows a cruciate or when he, we get sick and elderly. So I think it's really important that we understand those things. There's a couple really good books on the market that I really like. They're both out of print, but they're really useful and you can still get these books. One is written by Daniel Tortora called The Right Dog for You. Now, it
Mm,
doesn't have some of the newer breeds in it, but it does have charts that very specifically go through indoor behavior, indoor activity, outdoor activity, behavior toward children, behavior toward strangers, shedding, a lot of different things that I think people don't always consider when they're thinking about the characteristics that they want the dog to have from a behavioral and a physical standpoint. How much exercise do they need? A greyhound in the house is a very quiet dog. A greyhound outside is like a dot on the horizon. They are gone. So you have to know those things about the sighthounds.
and
Um,
so go ahead and tell me your other book, but then I wanted to
sure.
mention something else too. Go ahead.
Sure. The other one is written by Benjamin and Lynn Hart. They're both veterinarians.
Mm,
That's called The Perfect Puppy. There's a couple of editions of that, and it helps you select. And they used dog show judges and breeders as their resource for what these different characteristics were going to look like. So there's a couple of editions, I think 2 or 3 editions of that book. The Daniel Tortora book, to my knowledge, there's only one edition. But if you go on Amazon or Abe Books or,
e-
Barnes and Noble, whatever,
mhm,
there's some of those books still floating around in print. And they're very useful before you make a dog selection
mhm.
to do some research. There's no pet stores at the mall in most places anymore, so you're not going to have that spontaneous decision. But there's Pet Finder and there's Facebook and there's Craigslist and all kinds of other things that we still make mistakes and think with our hearts before we think with our heads about our dog selection.
Right. And so that's what I wanted to mention. So books are a really great resource. And one of the groups that I'm involved with that I think is really impressive in updating the way we think about matching ourselves to a dog. We're going to talk specifically dogs here. It's called the Doggit app. And this is an organization that's run by a couple sisters that I've known since they were kids. They're real serious dog people. They have built a matching, like Match Me a Dog. Their matching app is amazing. And
Yeah.
if you read the books and you think this and then go and take this, it's free, right? It is an incredible resource for thinking about where your new pet, what your new pet should be, assuming it's going to be a dog, which breed works for you. It's a phenomenal opportunity.
Right. So really you want to do your research, reach out to breeders. And most breeders are going to be pretty honest with you. If you're thinking about getting a chow chow and you have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, most of the time you're going to have somebody that's honest with you about whether this is an appropriate breed or not. So you want to make sure that your lifestyle, that the dogs in it, the other pets in it, the people in it, the people that may come into your lifestyle, those are all really important things. You may not have grandma living with you now, but 3 years from now, she falls, she has to move into your house. You wanna think through some of these things so that you're prepared. Where do you live? What size is your yard? What's your apartment
Mhm.
like? Can you have dogs? I mean, there's just a lot of really important things that have to be taken into account, and a lot of this didn't during COVID, no one was really prepared for the things that
Mhm.
that happen, and heaven knows we aren't likely to have that again. But if we have an economic crisis, it may change your lifestyle. You may just want to think through some of the things. I don't want to be doomy gloomy, all negative Nancy, but think through what the next 10 or 15 years of your life are likely to look like. You can't predict everything, but this dog is going to be with you if you get him as a young dog for 15 years.
And so, one of the things that we really need to make clear, we are very much in favor of adopt or shop. Okay. If you want to adopt a dog, you should adopt a dog, but you should still go through all of the same ideas and research that Marty and I are talking about, because the idea is to have fewer dogs in shelters, not more. And it, one of the ways that you can do that is to make really good choices before the dog gets into your home so that it doesn't have to go to a shelter.
Right. I mean, that's where the perfect puppy comes in. It's not how you train that puppy, it's how you select the puppy that fits your lifestyle so that you are making good decisions. And it goes through enough general information that even if you're thinking about getting, maybe it's a purpose bred dog that has two or more genetic, types, like it's a Bernedoodle or a Labradoodle or whatever it happens to be, or it's a mixed breed dog that we don't know much about.
Mhm.
Those are still characteristics that you can make a pretty good estimation of by using these resources. The dog it, I mean, if you're thinking about a Bernedoodle, look at the Bernese Mountain Dog and the Poodle and kind of look at how those look together
Mhm.
when that blend happens. So really think through whether it's purpose bred, whether it's a randomly sourced dog, whether it's a purebred dog. Think about what you're going to live with, what it looks like. Who else is in your life? Do you have a like a few months ago, I had a fiance that came in, and the two of them had dogs that did not get along with each other, and it was causing some serious problems on the cusp of them leaving the country to get married. So just really be careful about what you select, because certain breeds are just predictably, or certain types of dogs are just predictably not going to be collegial, congenial, easy to get along with. And if you think somewhere down the line you want to have some other person in your life with another dog, think that through before you get a dog that may not fit that criteria. You think you may want kids in 5 years, think about it, because kids change everything in your life, and they're awesome. I love my kids. I love my grandkids, but you have to be thoughtful because not every dog fits every lifestyle.
Doggett simplifies the puppy buying journey by connecting families with the perfect breed and responsible, health verified breeders. They are the only breeder marketplace that verifies health clearances and responsible breeding practices. Through their personalized puppy matcher tool and matchmaker services, they educate and guide buyers every step of the way, ensuring a seamless process and a perfect match for their lifestyle. From initial breed consultation to introductions with top breeders, Doggett makes responsible puppy ownership easy and stress-free.
The other thing that so often people don't consider, and I would strongly encourage that they do, is to look at the grooming needs of whatever
Hmm.
pet you're going to bring into your home. If you're going to bring one of the crossbred dogs or a purebred dog or anything else that has a lot of hair, you might hear somebody say, "Oh, it doesn't shed," or "You don't have to brush it." They're lying. there
Hmm.
are there are breeds that don't shed, poodles amongst them. They have hair instead of fur. That's a really important distinction. And so fur sheds, hair, like what we have and what poodles have, doesn't. But
Hmm.
simply a dog being bred with a poodle does not ensure that that dog won't shed. Okay.
Right.
So,
There's wavy coats, there's curly coats, but there's DNA tests for that.
mhm,
So and a lot of breeders are using Paw Print and Embark and some of these companies to DNA test their puppies. And the rescues can do this too. You can ask for them to DNA test. Right now, they're all running specials. So there's always a discount on some of those tests. And if you're not quite sure, you haven't quite committed, it only takes about 2 weeks to get a result back. So have a DNA test done, get the idea of the breed or the
mhm,
breed types that went into this dog, what their characteristics are like. There's diseases, there's traits, there's
mhm.
parentage, and there's breed. So those are the four general categories of what DNA tests can tell us. And you can get 350 of those tests in one cheek swab at Paw Print for, around $100. So get the information, spend the $100, and make sure what you're getting is what you think you're getting.
And then also, assuming that you're going to get a dog that needs grooming, know what those grooming needs are. Grooming is an
Mhm.
absolutely imperative part of keeping dogs. And I have worked in pet grooming. I have worked with professionally with show dogs. Okay. All of the grooming is important. And just because your dog doesn't like to have its toenails trimmed doesn't mean it doesn't need its toenails trimmed. And just because it doesn't like to be brushed doesn't mean it doesn't need brushed. And so these are so, so, so important for the health and well being of your dog. If its toenails are curled up under its toes, it can't walk right. It's in pain. If it isn't brushed to the skin, it's going to get sores on its skin. And I know you don't want your dog to be
No,
uncomfortable. And
no.
so look at professional grooming, look at classes about how to groom the dog yourself. There's lots and lots of ways that you can do this, but just simply not doing it isn't really an option. And I'm
Right.
speaking to someone who worked in a 40 dog a day groom shop, and we would have competitions where all four of us on that were the groomers had dogs on the table that were felted to the skin. In other words,
Yep.
the hair had made a mat all the way down to the skin, and the only way that that dog could be groomed was to shave it with a 40 blade, which is like
Hmm.
down the skin. And we would
Hmm.
have competitions to see which one of us could take the dog's hair off in a full dog shaped pelt. And so,
Yes.
okay, make your dog groomer happy. I
Yes.
promise you that isn't the way to do it.
No. And if a dog needs regular grooming, it's around $60 to $80, depending on the breed, depending on the kind
Or
of care
more.
you do, every 6 to 8 weeks.
Mhm.
So if that's going to be a cost that's cost prohibitive for you, yes, you don't have to vacuum because the hair is not falling out. You don't have to buy a Roomba and watch it go around the house and vacuum for you, but you do have to do some kind of coat care. So if you don't want coat care, get a dog that doesn't require coat care. Like get a beagle. They shed, but they don't mat. So get a
Yes,
pug. They don't mat. Look at the kind of coat you're looking at.
a Boston Terrier, you know,
Yeah, they're
a
adorable. And they
Dalmatian.
don't, yeah.
Yeah,
But everything that sheds on a Dalmatian and everything that sheds on a Boston Terrier is black and white. So no matter what color you wear, the hair sticks
yeah,
straight up out of your clothing
100%.
and you can see it. Yeah,
100%. And I mean, again, not on the Debbie Downer thing, but just keep these things in mind that we're talking about. We're saying them for a reason based on our
right.
experience. When I was in college, I worked at an animal shelter. That was one of my internships. And I did presentations to schools about animal safety and animal care. And it was a challenging job, and I knew the folks that had to put the animals down. And my very first dog out of the house as an adult was a dog I rescued from that shelter that was some kind of shepherd lab malamute mix kind of thing. And the one that finally sent me over the edge into like screaming hysteria was the people who brought a dog in because they changed their furniture and it didn't match it anymore.
Right. Right. I did go furniture shopping one time, and there was somebody in there with golden retriever hair in a Ziploc bag, and they were matching it to the couch. So there's ways around it. But yes, think about it.
Yeah.
And, if you don't like wearing black and white and not having black and white hair sticking out, then don't get a Boston Terrier or a Dalmatian. I mean, just, seriously, if you just think about it, just plan ahead, buy a lot of lint rollers, buy a
Yep.
Roomba, and
Yep.
and
The
just accept
bottom
the fact you will have hair.
the bottom line is this. Think about what you're going to get. Think
Yep.
about how it matches your lifestyle, your resources, all of those kind of things, because
Yes,
our goal, every one of us, is to have fewer animals in an animal shelter. And that's a thing
absolutely.
that I think we should probably touch on as well. Working with a reputable breeder of purebred dogs, particularly, but also some of the crossbred dogs, you will get a contract and it will say that if
Mhm,
you can no longer keep this dog, it must be returned to the breeder. And that is
mhm.
the ways that responsible purebred dog breeders are specifically working to keep pets out of animal shelters. They will always take that dog back. So, touch on that a little bit.
Sure. And again, contracts can vary widely. I see people that take them off the internet and they try to take bits and pieces of different contracts and put them together, and it doesn't work out well. You really need to have an attorney that helps you write an appropriate contract with appropriate clauses in it that don't contradict each other and that actually are enforceable. If you put a contract clause in that says you owe me $30,000 if this dog accidentally gets bred, well, that's not enforceable. It's not going to happen. Be reasonable. Pick your jurisdictions. But use an attorney that knows something about animals, and it doesn't have to be a dog attorney. People that do equine horse work, they write really great contracts. Agriculture attorneys do a great job. So use somebody that has some knowledge of this to write a contract, but don't pick and choose clauses because you're going to come up with a very difficult contract. But
Okay.
yes, most
Fire.
breeders will, yeah. So most breeders will either take the dog back or at least want first option to take the dog back. Maybe they've gotten to a point in their life that they can't take the dog back for whatever reason, but they want to have involvement in making sure that that dog gets appropriately placed. I sold a dog to a couple that was 89 years old, knowing that their daughter was going to take the dog,
Mhm.
not if something happened to them. They were 89 and they bought a puppy. I'm pretty sure they're not going to live 14 more years and happily in their own home. They'd be 105. Um, it's not going to work. So just be thoughtful about it, but
Mhm.
put put provisions in that make sense. If there's a resource that you need to have developed, do that. There's Deb Hamilton is an attorney that does some really great programs
Jen.
on the MAP project, MAAP. She talks about a program that you get together with some of your dog friends and that you all have a group, a
Mhm.
co-op that if something happens to you and you're single, or if even if you're not single, if something happens, like you're both in the same car accident at the same time, that there's someone that's lined up to help take care of the dogs in the interim. Because if you have your dogs in a will, the trust needs to take it over before the will does, because the will may take a year and a half. That dog needs to be somewhere that
Mhm.
somebody's feeding it and taking it outside for a year and a half while this all happens.
Mhm.
So use Deb Hamilton's program, use some of these other programs, do a good job picking an attorney to help you write a contract, and or before you sign a contract with somebody, that you've actually read it. Don't just sign it. There can be really good one-page contracts. There can be really bad 10-page contracts, but there can be good 10-page contracts too. So read it ahead of time. Don't wait until you go to pick up the dog, or don't hand
Yep.
it to the person when they're there to pick up the dog. That's not fair. Unless it's, 2 paragraphs long and says you'll take good care of my dog and you'll call me if something happens to you. That's a pretty simple contract, but it pretty much says what you need it to say. So, just be reasonable about all these decisions that you're making.
And I think the important part to me is that understanding that relationship that we talk about building, that's something that is there to protect everybody, protect the breeder, protect the buyer,
Yes.
the dog, which is really
Yes.
kind of what matters.
That is really the essential thing. I mean, when you buy a dog from somebody, you are entering a long-term relationship with them, but the dog's best interests are really where everything should focus. And I see too many people that get in these ego battles about ownership that have nothing to do with the dog's best interests. Doesn't matter if it's a divorce or, what it is. People have to stop being so egocentric and really focus on, if the dog's attached to the children and the children aren't going to be in the same lifestyle, think about what's best for the dog first and foremost. And co-ownerships, that's the reason AKC really doesn't like co-ownerships, is because it gets really messy when you put more than one person on the ownership of a dog. Even if it's a married couple, at the time they're married, it may not stay that way. So the first time I bought a dog, my first corgi, was the breeder said to me, just your name on the contract,
Hmm.
just your name on the AKC papers.
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, I mean, obviously she'd seen it go south.
Right. Right. And I think, there's lots and lots and lots of ways to own dogs, to acquire dogs, to source your dog. We're throwing out a whole bunch of options. I think another consideration that people don't kind of doesn't cross their mind sometimes is what we call purebred rescue. So, dogs in animal shelters, a lot of times, if there happens to be a purebred dog in an animal shelter, the purebred rescue for that breed will rescue the dog and foster it until they can find a new home for it. I know the National German Wirehair Pointer Rescue does a lot of this, and it
Mhm.
helps keep animals out of shelters, which is the goal that we all have. And it also can be a really great way to both help a dog in need, if that's what you're looking for, and also to have a purebred dog that is predictable, that things about it. And so, thoughts on that one also?
No, that's a a great organization, a great group of organizations. They can be regional, they can be local, they can be national. But if you have your heart set on a particular breed, some of those dogs, well, some are rescues, some actually end up in shelters, and like you said, the purebred dog group will go get the dog out of the shelter and keep it until they can find a home. Sometimes, if you just talk to breeders, they've got retiring show
Yes.
dogs or retiring breeding dogs. And again, those responsible breeders don't dump those dogs into dog shelters.
Mm-mm.
Responsible breeders take care of their own. They find an opportunity to rehome those dogs. And those are amazing dogs. I mean, they're housebroken, they're crate trained, they're used to being groomed.
Mhm.
They've maybe had a litter or two, and they're 4, 5, 6 years old. They're retiring. Gosh, what a wonderful dog. I have people that are standing in line waiting for corgis of mine like that because they are amazing dogs. I usually have several people on my list waiting for when I finally finish this dog and finish breeding her, she's gonna go out into their life. And I've had people they've had maybe 3 of our dogs that way because
Mhm.
they love that. So there's a lot of options for how you can get the right dog for you, but just make sure that you're using your resources and you're smart, and that when you decide you want a dog, you don't decide you want it today. You
Yes.
need to contact a breeder a year ahead of time. You need to contact the rescue well in advance so that you are on that list.
Mhm.
The instant gratification of getting a dog is usually going to end up, I have people that say, I want this corgi, and then they go off and they get something else, and then they call me and they're not happy with it because it wasn't a good choice for them.
Right.
So think it through and be planning ahead. Don't expect that you're going to get the dog you want, that breed, that color, that sex, that day. It's not likely to happen.
They're not toasters.
They're not toasters. No,
And
you can't buy them off the shelf.
no. And I mean, that's where we started, and that's a good place to kind of slide into the end of our conversation. But I really want to go back and talk about the retired pets, the
Yeah.
retired show and breeding dogs, because I hear people, and they've said it to me, how can you possibly place your pet? You were just crying about your dog that died. How can you possibly place your pet? And so I really, really want to have this conversation because it's important.
Mhm.
And I will say that it's always a decision. I've placed ones that it was really, really hard for me to place. And I've placed dogs that, was like, well, you and I were never friends anyway. I mean, this is the reality of having multiple dogs is that one individual dog is not getting as much one on one attention as it will
Mhm.
get somebody else's couch. It's well cared for, it's happy, it's healthy, it's fed, it's housed. It is, in many cases, getting some level of enrichment, but there is a difference. If you've got 10 dogs in your house, there's a difference between being one of 10 and being one on somebody's couch. And if our
Right.
goal is to make sure that along the way our dogs live the very best lives they can, while it might be a challenge for me, I'll use an example of Taylor. Taylor is a perfectly good example. Taylor was actually Bing's mother. Taylor was, I loved her. She was fabulous. She was easy to get along with. We were pals. She was a great show dog. She was a great mom. And I had an owner return of an older female. That was her aunt, actually. And they hated each other. I mean, with a
Mhm.
screaming purple passion. And I've never
Yes.
had wire hair bitches hate each other like these two did.
Yes.
And so one of them had to get placed. One of them was a 9-year-old scurfy old lady, and one of them was a healthy, young, happy, fulfilled female that went to very dear friends of mine who were elderly, who had just lost their last dog. She was with them until the husband passed away. She is still living with them in the daughter's house. She absolutely is in an amazing home and
Mhm.
the center of the universe in that home.
Right. Right. And I've had the same situation where I've had 2 bitches that didn't get along, or, it was a dog that I appreciated but didn't have my heart. just didn't have my heart. You
Mhm.
know, there's just some dogs that connect with you in a different way.
Mhm.
I've got some dogs that will never leave my house ever, ever until they go out
Mhm.
stiff.
Mhm.
I have other dogs that are like, you've been great. You've done what I needed you to
Love your
do. I
pet.
appreciate you. I love you, but I don't need to keep you forever. And if you can be someone's one and only, and
Mhm.
some dogs really like being that
Yeah.
one and only dog, and other dogs really want that social group. So you have to kind of pick the home that you're placing them in based on that. But there are some dogs that they just love the praise and the attention that's lavished on them. They want to be an only dog and they are happy.
With the crown and the
Oh
velvet
yes,
bed
right.
and
The little plate with the
yeah.
parsley on it, it's all good. you know so we have to look at every dog as an individual. I do, you do, and there are just some times that that's the best place for them to be, and there's nothing wrong with that, because that dog is going to have an amazing life. It's just not with you. But and I think all of my dogs are well cared for.
Yeah.
It's just they're cared for differently if they're the only dog in a household than they are when, like, my dogs, they get their nails done every Saturday. This dog's not going to get their nails done every Saturday, but guess what? It's got a really good life. It's going to go to the groomer every 6 weeks, and the groomer is going to love this dog, and the dog walker is going to love this dog, and it's all good. So every dog is different. Every personality is different, and every person's lifestyle has to be looked at individually on what their needs are.
Yep. 100%. All right. Well, Marty, thank you. We are going to let our listeners go and hope that they're going to stop back with us next week when we're going to talk a little bit about how to integrate this new pet into your home, whether it's your first, your 90 millionth, or it's one of three, or it's its only. We're gonna walk you through all of it. So we'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Sounds great.
Thank you for joining us on the Marty and Laura Show. We're excited to bring you these unique, fun, fact-based conversations about pet health. We hope you'll join us on social. Stop by the website to sign up for an extra tip of the week for your pet. While you're at it, do us a favor, please, and leave a review wherever you find your podcasts. The Marty and Laura Show is produced by Pure Dog Talk, Inc., sound design and editing by Premium Audio Services.